Tom stood in the back storage room of the church and prayed in front of a set of candles, head bowed and hands clasped. The worst part of his job was always the funerals, but this one stung a little more than the rest. Father Jacob had instructed him to get the unused box of white candles, in memory of someone so young returning to the arms of the Lord. As he finished his prayer and opened the dusty box, he thought back to his old life. Never in a million years did he think he would become a priest. His family was never religious, and he'd had no relation to the church. But there was always a calling, as Father Jacob said, and he remembered the day it happened all too well. Tom had stepped into the precinct office 2 minutes later than normal that spring day, the sweltering Texas heat warming his suit against his skin. He flashed his badge to the man at the front desk, who nodded and welcomed him in. Then he took the stairs to the second floor, where he set his bag down next to his desk and flipped open his laptop. Today is the day, he told himself. He'd always been an honest worker, willing to see the case to its close, no matter what that meant about the people around him. It's why he speculated he'd been assigned this particular cartel case. They had multiple routes set up along and across the border, and he was slowly making strides. It often meant stepping on some toes, whether it be his colleagues or someone in their tight-knit community. But that was of little concern to him. In fact, he'd been warned multiple times about the danger of the case. The chief repeatedly told him to tread carefully and that the cartel was a serious threat. But he never took it too seriously. Empty threats were empty threats. And so he sat in front of his laptop and made a chart of all the information he'd collected the previous day. There was another new tie between two of their potential suspects, further solidifying the legal case they were developing. But, as often goes in the line of work, one connection leads to another, and he was setting up for a massive bust. When was it enough? How many red lines connecting different faces would it take for him to be satisfied with his work dismantling the cartel operation? He knew the answer. His principles required that it be as close to everyone as he could get. The less metaphorical strings left dangling, the better. It meant digging his own grave, but principles were principles. His eyes drifted to a framed photo of him with his wife and son hanging above his desk. He was doing this for them, even if it meant they could be in danger. But those threats weren't serious. With a few more sentences and descriptions entered into his program, he compiled the databank, which flashed with a green bar at the top. There were more connections automatically found for him between one of the two new faces and most of the web already created. This had to be the man behind it all. He quickly reached for his corded office phone and dialed for the chief's number. "What is it, Tom?" "I've got a major development. Is your office open?" "I've got 15 minutes. "Not good enough. Can you clear your next meeting?" "What do you mean, not good enough? How major of a development are we talking here?" Tom, not wanting to wait another second, threw the phone down and practically jogged across the floor to the chief's office, laptop in hand. He carefully closed the door behind him and smiled. "I found him." "Who?" "The man tying it all together. Micah Vargas. He was one of the people I had dived into yesterday, collected information. See how the web connects all to him?" "This is unprecedented," the chief said, leaning close and holding his glasses to read the screen. "You're sure this is all right?" "The computer filled in all of this based on our database. Unless it's wrong, then I'm positive this is it." "Great. Call Danielle to get warrants out for the U.S. citizens, and I'll get a task force moving on everyone else." "Wait, we can't do that yet." "What? Why not? You said it yourself, Tom. This is our guy. We need to end this now and keep our town safe." "I know, but this isn't everyone. We need to be sure we have all the top brass." "You don't have all the top brass yet?" "No. I didn't even know he was top brass until 3 minutes ago. I need more time." The chief rubbed the bridge of his nose. "All right, you have until the end of the week to get me more names. Unless you're convinced we can get more big names after that, we're moving in. They can't know we're closing in on them." "I've been as covert as I can. There's no way they have anything." Great. Get to work, detective. Tom excitedly headed back to his desk, preparing his casework for the day. There were 3 names he wanted to hunt for during the day, which was about 6 hours of driving between locations. But he could afford another late night, especially now that there was a deadline. His wife would understand. And then the phone rang. He waited to see the number, which he didn't recognize. Most of the time, it was either someone on the floor in the field or a random number calling to threaten him to stop his casework. His best guess was option number 3, seeing as he didn't recognize the number. "Davy," he called out. "Can we get some triangulation going for my line?" "Again?" his coworker called out. "Good thing I still have it up from last time." He picked the phone up and placed it to his ear. "Detective Tom Barnes," the voice on the other line said. "I heard you saw my buddy yesterday." "Who is this?" "Tell me, Tom, how much do you value your family?" "Because I love my family. There's something so valuable to working all day, knowing you'll come back home to a beautiful wife and your kids. That's one of the big 2 things in life, detective. Family and money. You know, some people value money way more than family, if you can imagine that, detective. Money runs the world, or at least America. You value your family. You think you're on some sort of holy crusade to purge us out of your city, your country, so you can keep your family safe, keep your son safe, am I right? But some people are multifaceted, Detective Tom. They value their family and their money, and I love both equally, so when I tell you that if I lose my money, you're going to lose your family, maybe you can start to understand what's at stake here. Do you? Do you understand what I'm asking? Narrowed it down to a gas station about an hour away from here, Davy said, sending you the address. What a beautiful little story about life, Tom responded. I have one of my own. Did you know that people like you are morally bankrupt and destroying the sanctity of what we work so hard to maintain? Do you think I'm going to weep if you lose your money or go rot in a cage just because you have a family? I'm not stopping until your entire operation is behind bars. Do you understand that? The person on the other line sighed, and the line clicked shut. Tom bounced to his feet, grabbed his vest, and bolted down the stairs to hop into his SUV. An hour was more than enough time for whoever was talking to him to escape. But it was the second time someone had stayed on the line long enough to ping their exact location, and he wasn't going to waste a single chance. As he drove, he made a mental note that the person he had found the day before was not the one pulling all the strings unless the man he had talked to was bluffing. An hour later, he arrived at the gas station, nearly out of fuel himself, and scoped the location. It was almost completely empty, aside from the person behind the counter. No matter. He was close to one of his 3 targets for the day. It had been a long day, but productive nonetheless. The people he had sought out to get more information on were surprisingly cooperative in giving him information, whether they knew he was getting it from them or not. As he drove back to town about 40 minutes away, he called the chief. Tom, this had better be good news again. The office is open for another 3 minutes. You bet, sir. The 3 I looked at today were all high profile. I haven't set up the web yet, but I've got some pretty good leads that could point them to about the same status as the one I showed you today. Great. Remember, you have 2 days to get this taken care of. Yeah, His phone began to ring a different number. It wasn't one he recognized, but he was never worried about it being the cartel on his personal phone. There was no way they had that information. Bah! Hey, I'll have to call you back or talk about it tomorrow. Getting another call. All right. He swiped to accept it, ending the one with the chief. Hello? Is this Tom Barnes? Who is this? This is the paramedic team here in town. I'm standing in the park, and it appears your wife and child were shot and killed. Shot, and what? How far away are you, sir? I can be there in 30. He threw his phone down and floored the car. Admittedly, Tom didn't remember much of the car ride back. Things weren't making sense in his head. There was no crying or screaming at first, but a growing pain in his chest and lungs told him he felt suffocated. It wasn't a physical pain, it was something more. The pain of knowing something unspeakable had happened, and he didn't know how to process it yet. He merged onto a highway and flipped his lights on, soaring past everyone else as they made way. Just that morning, he'd taken his son to kindergarten. It was pajama day, and he'd taken his favorite Mickey Mouse set. He was working on tracing his letters, and had nearly figured out how to write his own name without the guides. Just that morning, he dropped his wife off at her job. They had kissed like it was any other day. He was supposed to be expecting tacos for the night, and then read in bed with her until she fell asleep with the book in her hand. And they weren't going to be home to greet him when he got back. His brain couldn't handle it, so his foot stayed pressed to the floor, and he swerved over to make it onto the ramp for his exit 10 minutes down the highway. His SUV, however, wasn't ready for the shift. His axles buckled, and the vehicle started to tumble to the side of the road, where it rolled repeatedly, smashing every side. At some point, he went unconscious, either from the pain or the damage. The next waking moments he remembered were fleeting. A shot of an ambulance, 3 doctors over him in an operating theater, and being wheeled down a sterile hall. Consciousness came back to him in full a day later, where he woke up in a room completely alone. A series of monitors, casts, and liquids were all attached to him, ensuring his health in some capacity. As he silently waited for a nurse to come in and check on him during their rounds, small pieces were slowly coming back to him. His wife and son were dead. He had crashed on his way to go see them. There was no way of knowing how long ago that was yet, but his heart ached, and finally, a sob escaped him. He was released from care 3 months later. His drive back home was a different kind of quiet than he'd ever experienced in his life. A familiar car was in the driveway of his house when he arrived on the street, and as he stepped out of his truck, his mother-in-law appeared in the window of his living room. He prepared mentally for the afternoon and walked to his front door, opening it with as little force as possible. "Thomas Barnes, I'm glad to see you. I wish I could say the same to you. I can't believe you let this happen." "Let what happen?" "You're the reason my daughter and grandson are dead." He wanted to say something, anything, but knew she was right. Of course she was. His lip quivered a little. "You weren't there for her. You never were. You shouldn't have acted like a hero with that stupid case you were working on with the cartel. You should have given that case to somebody else on your team, or stopped it entirely. And now they're dead. They're both dead because of you. You murdered my daughter, my grandson. You're a cop, and you couldn't even protect them." She maintained venomous eye contact as she walked out the front door, then drove off in her car. He screamed as loud as he could, anger bubbling in his chest, and fell to his knees. After another month of sitting at home alone, slowly healing his broken bones, most of the biggest damages he'd sustained were healing or healed, and so he was permitted to come back to the office. It's not like he had much else he was interested in doing at the time anyway. Pitiful eyes followed him all the way to the chief's door, which he knocked on and opened. "You're not supposed to be back yet, detective," the chief said, standing up. "Get out of here. My being here is medically approved. No field work, just office. And I'm telling you, we have nothing for you right now. You are still placed on leave. I'll call you Monday next week to see where everything stands. Please, Chief, you've got to let me come back. This is all I have right now. I need to find the man who did this. Please." The chief sighed and motioned for Tom to sit. It was a bit of a chore, but he did so almost painlessly. "I was hoping to tell you under different terms, but it's been handled, Tom. Besides, you wouldn't have been able to work the case anyway. That would have been a conflict of interest." "What? What do you mean? How was it handled?" "We caught the killers. They were found pretty much right after the murders and sentenced to life 3 weeks ago. Justice has been delivered. I know it's not enough, and it never will be. But our team has done its due diligence." I don't... Why did... Please, Tom, go back home. Take the week. You clearly need it." Defeated and in shambles, he stood from the seat in front of his boss's desk and walked out of the building, somber. The case never recovered after the arrests. The people who had killed his wife and son were directly related to the cartel, and their arrests left massive holes in the web that couldn't be fixed. After months of going back and forth, struggling to get good information for the chief and some heavy drinking, they had to let him go. And so he did the only other thing he felt he could do: continue the drinking. He drank a lot and often woke up the next morning on the floor of his living room, which was beginning to turn into a disgusting mess. Overdue mail was piling up, and it wasn't long before he was evicted by the bank. There was a long while where he drifted on the streets, drinking himself away, suffering from the consequences of his actions. How could he have let himself risk his family like that? He hardly cared for his own health. In fact, the only way he saw any relief was to die as soon as possible. It was all he wanted anymore. He seriously debated doing it himself on numerous occasions, often when severely drunk. But it all came to a boiling point when he was on a different side of town than he was used to. A group of kids had decided to mug him, and he was an easy target. They stole what was left of his pocket change, as well as his wallet, and left him out in the cold. He convinced himself this was it. As soon as he found a good place to do it, he was going to try to end it all. That next morning, on a Sunday, Father Jacob locked the church up and exited the back door. It had been another successful sermon, and he was happy to see some new faces in the crowd. What he wasn't happy to see was Tom, drunk and passed out under the fence. He approached Tom and helped him up. Once he determined he was sober enough to join him inside for a cup of coffee, he asked Tom what had happened. As it turned out, he'd never made it to a spot where he could try to end it all. He'd blacked out 15 minutes later while trying to hop the fence. "You're lucky it's me who found you," Father Jacob said. "Anybody else may have called the police." Tom did his best to piece together the image of the man in front of him. He only vaguely remembered, but he was pretty sure Father Jacob had offered him a ride once to shield him from the rain. A stand-up man who had once again come to his rescue. "Hey, I know the guys on the force. They're nothing I'm scared of." "A repeat offender?" "I used to be one of them, Father, but not since the..." He couldn't bring himself to talk about it. The thought stung more when he was sober. "I have a proposal for you, Thomas. Why don't you stay at my place for a while? I have this nice little home next to the church where I live alone." "I couldn't do that to you. The last thing you need is me. I'm a burden." "Nonsense. I'm begging you to let me house you. It can be temporary if you'd like." "What's the catch, Father?" "Nothing. I can't stand to watch someone like you suffer like this, and any little bit I can do to help, I want to." Tom accepted Father Jacob's offer and lived under his roof for an entire month. At first, there wasn't a lot the two of them did or talked about. With a little help, Tom slowly weaned himself off of the alcohol. And once that barrier was removed, the two of them began to hold conversations together. The one Tom remembered the most was on a random Thursday night. They were sitting in Father Jacob's living room, staring at the fireplace, when a thought came to Tom's mind. He asked to learn more about what Father Jacob was doing at the church. In turn, they stayed up late into the night, discussing all the different things that Father Jacob does for his community and the things that could heal a torn soul. But the church was always busy, and there wasn't time for everything. "I could help. I mean, if you'd accept the help. After all, you've already done so much for me." "There isn't a lot you can do to help, I'm afraid. Most of it is up to me as the head of the church." "There's got to be something. I'll mow the lawn for you. Clean out the gutters. You have lights you need fixed? I noticed one last Sunday in the worship hall. Small things, anything." It was that discussion that led to Tom being a full-time resident for the church, keeping the place in top condition and doing odd jobs that would otherwise cost them too much money. In return, Father Jacob taught him the scripture and connected him with religion in a way that he'd never had before. After a year of participating at the church, Tom decided he had found his path. He couldn't imagine doing anything other than working for Father Jacob at the church. Sure, he'd gotten his own job, by then working at a hardware store, but all of his free time was devoted to the church. Another 3 years after that, he came to Father Jacob in his office with his phone pulled out. I've just signed up for classes on the clergy, he said. I've decided I want to become a priest. A priest? Father Jacob repeated. It's a big step. I know. It takes a lot of focus and a lot of interpersonal skills. I've been learning from the best. If you're looking for my blessing, Thomas, you have it. I'm not the one who decides who gets the call. God is. For the past 3 years, he'd been a priest under Father Jacob's wings. With almost 10 cumulative years of experience at the church, he was a shoo-in to help the aging father continue with the day-to-day work. His main goal was always to ease his burden, but every once in a while, he had the opportunity to pay his aid forward. Every now and then, he came across someone who needed help like he had so many years ago, offering them food and shelter and helping to get them back on their feet. It was the least he could do in his mind. A majority of the people he helped relapsed sooner or later, and he'd had a few repeats, but for those that had truly transformed with his help, it made all the trouble worth it. He grabbed the candles out of the box and exited the storage room of the church, headed back to the offices. Father Jacob's door was still locked, but he knocked a few times on it. Father Jacob, it's nearly time to begin the processions. I've gotten the candles. Great, the father's voice called out from behind the door. Go ahead and set them up in the hall. I'll be out soon enough. He did as told, tracing the long hallway down to the worship hall, where a few people had already begun to gather in the pews and in front of the casket. He carefully placed the candles in their stands, unlit for the moment, and stood near the doorway, ready to greet and console people walking in. No matter how hard he tried, his eyes drifted over to the picture of Peter Lamb on full display near the casket. Peter was a little over triple the age of Tom's son when not many more people had entered the worship hall in the next 10 minutes, and as the clock ticked closer and closer to noon, Tom was beginning to worry that Father Jacob wasn't going to be ready on time. It wasn't exactly a good idea to keep a funeral service waiting, and he could see some of the unrest growing at the front of the room. He traveled back to Father Jacob's office, where he politely knocked again. Father, it's time for the service. I know that. Give me just a few more minutes. Of course. I'll do my best to mitigate the noise. That's it. He walked back out to the worship hall and stood at the entrance again, where a woman approached him. She was the mother of Peter, the deceased boy, but almost looked too young. Maybe she was the in-law. Can we hurry this up? I was hoping to have this on its way by now. Of course. As soon as Father Jacob is done getting around, we will be ready to begin the service. It should be any time now. Great. Good. It seemed the woman was trying to squeeze out a tear. I just want this to be over with. She hastened away. Tom figured she must really have been in a hurry to get this whole thing taken care of. He also wondered if the dad was in the picture anywhere. He knew of too many cases where the father was missing or gone and hoped that she wasn't going to be alone. But it wasn't his business. After 10 years of being at the church, he knew when things were and weren't his business. And it certainly wasn't right now. All he had to worry about for the service was preparing and singing the hymns, and to prepare the young man's soul. Everything else was worldly and inconsequential. Or should have been. He just couldn't calm down. Something was beginning to feel off. Maybe it was the old detective in him. He silently approached the crowd gathered near the front of the worship hall, where a few people had gathered around the casket. Once he was sure nobody was paying attention to him, he leaned in to see what was happening. A younger woman was sitting next to the coffin, eyes puffy and red. An unending sob left her chest. 2 other girls sat next to her, clearly there for moral support. But other than that, she seemed to be the only one so broken up over the death. Perhaps a girlfriend or fiancée. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for the woman whom he'd assumed was the mother. She was standing next to a younger man, who had doll eyes for her. The father was clearly not in the picture. Her eyes were focused on her watch, nervously glancing down at it every few seconds. A chill ran down his back. What was she anticipating? Why was she so urgent? I can't believe she came here with her boyfriend, a guy in front of Tom said, leaning over to another guy. There's just so much about this that's off, man. What do you mean? The other man asked. I don't know, but there's something going on. When Peter's father died, his will supposedly said she's his guardian until he's married. Now, 2 weeks before the wedding, he winds up dead? I don't buy it. His detective senses were running wild, but he had to keep himself calm. There was no room for pretending to be back on the force. He couldn't interrogate anyone or try to connect any dots. There probably weren't even dots to connect. He'd heard this sort of story before at plenty of other funerals. All he had to do was mind his own business, sing, and help Peter find peace. Do you think we should go to the police about it? The other man asked, continuing their conversation. Nah, man, that's not a good idea. Her boyfriend? He's the police chief's nephew, Sean. Word is, Peter was working on something. A case, maybe. I heard him talking about it with Kate a week ago, and she begged him to stop. Whatever it was dangerous. Dangerous how? I don't know, man. But you know how Peter is. He basically laughed at her and told her he was going to take care of it. Quick and easy, he said. It almost seemed like something about his stepmother. But they walked away after that, so I lost track of the conversation. Sounds like a bunch of conspiracy nonsense to me. Come on, man, why would I lie to you? Tom sighed as he backed away a little. Nothing has changed in this world, he thought. Nothing at all. Lies and cruelty and pain. He was glad he left the world behind in pursuit of a higher power. There was rarely anything in life that truly affected him like that anymore. The woman was still looking nervously at her watch as Tom approached the coffin, drawing a few eyes. If anything, a prayer for Peter's soul wouldn't hurt. Everything else was ready, aside from Father Jacob. So there was no point in holding off on some of the smaller rituals. Still, something was making him feel jittery. The conversation those two men had, along with the strange behavior from the woman, started to eat away at his brain. Careful to respect the boundaries of who he assumed was Kate, still crying at the base of the coffin, he took a look at the boy inside. He certainly was too young, maybe 25 at most. A whole life ahead of him. What happened to you, son? Why are we still not started with this thing? The woman asked in a loud voice, walking his way with more confidence than before. Please do not yell in the church, Tom said, turning her way. Look, sir, I'd rather not be here all day. Why don't we just get this started already? I'm sorry, but if the sermon's being held up, maybe that's a sign that the soul is not done with this world yet. What? What in the backwards? What age are you living in? What soul? Let's cut the nonsense and start with the sermon already. At long last, Father Jacob appeared at the entrance of the worship hall, his hands raised. He began to make his rounds, greeting people, and giving his condolences. He reached the woman and had a long, quiet conversation with her. The tear ducts were trying to work again, and she managed a few as he talked, but as soon as his back was turned, her eyes were back on the watch. Let us begin the funeral service of Peter Lamb, Father Jacob said, raising his arms again. Finally. The sermon was a bit of an abridged version of his normal, due to the requests of Peter's mother-in-law. But it was still considerably long. As the sermon continued, with Tom positioned on the opposite side of the coffin as Father Jacob, he looked down at the boy in the coffin with regard. This was him many years ago. It was a wonder Tom had even survived. And then he noticed something strange on the body. As focus stayed on Father Jacob, he tried to determine what it was, but it looked like a line of thread just lying on the man. Without making it too obvious, he leaned in closer to see what was happening. A layer of some thread was coming off of his neck. There wasn't any time to investigate it at the moment, but he knew he had to come back to it somehow. That itch had returned. Nah! He spent the rest of the sermon doing his best to be discreet. If he hadn't had the experience of working as a detective, he might have completely blown his cover, but the service ended quickly and without incidents. When the casket was closed and carried outside, in preparation for the hearse to pick it up, Tom waited nearby the vehicle, watching the people funnel into their cars. The last of the grieving party to stay behind was Kate, who approached Tom and the hearse with dewy eyes. Thank you for putting up with her today, she said. I'm not sure I would have had the energy to do it. I'm terribly sorry for your loss. Are you the fiancé? Yeah, we were getting married in 2 weeks, but now, oh God. She walked away sobbing, and Father Jacob replaced her. Great work today, Tom. Are you going to stay here and wait for the driver? I figured, why not? Go home, Father. I'll take care of it today. You're a good man, Thomas. I will see you on Sunday morning. Of course. With Father Jacob and Kate out of the way, he glanced around to confirm nobody was watching and cracked the coffin open. The thread on Peter's neck seemed almost like it could tear away. He carefully lifted it and gave it a pull, and a mix of clarity and excitement swam around in his mind. This wasn't Peter. This was a completely different person disguised to be Peter. It was clearly a good disguise too, seeing as he hadn't even noticed the seams, except for where the thread was loose. No wonder the mother-in-law was looking to get the sermon over with so quickly. So who was this? And where was Peter? He swiftly closed the coffin as the hearse driver arrived. The man hesitated a little at the sight of Tom sitting in the car. Hey Tom, what are you doing here? I sort of figured I would hitch a ride with you today, if that's all right. Peter was a close family friend, and I'd like the opportunity to give him one last goodbye. Yeah, I suppose that's all right. The man got in the car and began the drive. Tom sat silently in the back with the coffin, thinking everything over. Whoever this dead person was, it wasn't Peter. It was Peter's replacement, which likely meant Peter was still alive out there somewhere. All he had to do was figure out a way to find him and potentially save his life. Where are we headed? He asked the driver. Linden Cemetery, all the way on the other side of town. Okay, that works. That works? What does that mean? Not to rush you, but could you step on the gas a little? What's going on, Tom? I'll explain here in a minute. Just know that we need to get to a quiet spot, somewhere in town. You're starting to freak me out. Do you trust me? Yeah, I do. Then let's get to a quiet spot. The driver did as told, peeling ahead of everyone else on the road and making some distance. Then Tom motioned for him to dip into an alley, and they stepped out before Tom opened the back door. Come here. I need to show you something. Tom, you know I don't want to look at the bodies. I can't do this. Trust me. Come see this. The man conceded and leaned over to watch Tom. He peeled a tiny sliver of the mask from the body's neck, and the man almost retched. This is a mask, Tom said. This is not Peter, the man you're supposed to deliver. This is a completely different person. Don't ask too many questions, because I don't have the answers. I just need you to drive to the police. Yeah, okay, let's go. The man carefully backed out of the alley, and together they drove to the station. Peter hadn't been there in years, and the sight of pulling into the parking lot brought back a weird feeling of nostalgia. He didn't hate the police or the people he worked with, partially because hate was below him now, having been transformed by the church, and partially because he left on mostly good terms with everyone. As they parked, his phone began to ring. Father Jacob, he said. What's the matter? Where's the hearse right now, Thomas? We had to make a quick detour. Rest assured we will be there soon. Okay, keep me updated, please. Oh, there will be updates. The hearse driver followed him into the station, where the same secretary from all those years ago greeted him. Tom, is that you? I almost didn't recognize you. What with the garb? Miss a funeral? Something like that. Hey, I need to report something. It's not a good situation. Instead of arriving at the cemetery with the hearse, Tom joined a squad car in going to visit Peter's grieving family. A group of 3 of them parked at the different entrances and began to file out. Tom stepped out and Father Jacob approached with confusion and worry. What's happening right now, Thomas? It wasn't Peter. What? That body, that boy, it wasn't him. Someone had placed a mask on somebody else's body. Let go of me! Peter's stepmother yelled, trying to break free from the grasp of 2 police officers. A few other people walked away, bound by the cops, including her boyfriend. But Kate walked free, opting to take the non-violent road. Tom knew she had nothing to do with it, but the police would want to confirm that avenue first. At the same time, Another group of officers had gone to Peter's house to do a search. If he was there, they would have word soon enough. "You coming with?" one of the officers asked Tom. "Me? Why?" "You're in on this. You reported it. Maybe it's only fair you get to see what's happening." "I'm not sure that's the protocol unless something changed over the past decade." "Come on, it'll be fun." "Yeah, all right." Tom only accepted the offer because of that itch in his head that needed scratching. But it turned out to be more than he needed to scratch it. The stepmother refused to talk at first, which was a stark contrast from every moment leading up to her being brought in for questioning. She threatened them with lawyers, but they were more than willing to let the game play out as long as possible. In the other interrogation room, however, her boyfriend faced a much different treatment. Being part of the force himself, he knew the people investigating him and was bending under the pressure. "I'm only going to ask once, Sean. Where is Peter?" "Look, I don't know, man. I don't know what she did with him or where she put him on or anything about the will. All I know is..." "Wait, what will?" I don't know. What will?" "Whose will is it, Sean?" "I don't know anything about all of this." "Really? I think we both know I can tell when someone is lying." The officer in the room with Sean approached him, and Tom watched with bated breath. At last, Sean cracked. "Okay, look, I know where he is, all right? Will you give me leniency if I tell you what happened?" "We'll see." Her husband, Peter's dad, got sick really bad at one point. And he was a rich man, absolutely loaded. So imagine her glee when she finds out he has a big will coming. But after a conversation one day, she discovered that he didn't put her on the will at all. Peter was going to be the sole inheritor of his fortunes, and were to get them the day he got married. That's a weird stipulation. Something about wanting Peter to settle down and have a family before getting the fortunes, I don't know. Maybe it was a responsibility thing. But she was pissed. She looked for so many ways to change the will before her husband died, but couldn't. It was totally up to him. "And what about Peter? Where is he? What happened?" "Well, this is when I came onto the scene, after her ex-husband's death. She wanted that money, and I wanted it too. And so she started developing some plans to convince him to sign some papers and transfer all the money to him, to give her all the rights. But she couldn't convince him. It was an endless battle. Things got bitter fast. She came to me one day and asked what would be the easiest way to have him killed, and how to do it as soon as possible. I wasn't on board with this idea. We couldn't kill him. Not only was it wrong, but he still had all the account information. She had no chance of getting to that money. So her next idea was to fake his death, kidnap him, hold him until he gave her the information, and plant a fake body. Where is he right now? In her basement, he's tied up in a chair. A few of the men in the viewing room repeated the information to their radio and ran out of the room. If he was telling the truth, they would find him soon enough. Then who is the fake body? Well, we hunted for a while for the right person. There was a lot we had to consider, but our best bet was going to be some homeless junkie on the other side of town. So we started the prep work. There were already a lot of overdoses in the area. We just needed to speed up the process and find one who fit the bill. You drugged homeless people? No, she did. I didn't do any of this. It was all her. But she'd found the right person and brought his dead body home to create a fake scene in the living room. She even had a mask pre-made to look like him. And so, she laid the body down, and Peter was tied in the basement, and she fought to get as much information out of him as she possibly could. Thank you, Sean. The man walked out of the room and moved to the other interrogation room, where the mother-in-law still sat stoic. Ma'am, your boyfriend has just confessed everything to us. You're lying? There's nothing to confess. He told us about the mask and the will and your plan to get the fortune from Peter. He told us that you tied him up in the basement. He told you that. Did he tell you any truths then? It was all him. He did it. I would never do that to Peter. It was all his idea. The detective's radio buzzed to life. We found him. Peter is alive in the basement of her house. She flexed her jaw, and in both rooms, a cop entered with handcuffs. After being sent to the hospital, Peter took a few days to recover. It wasn't until the third day, when Tom was busy back at the church getting the place ready for another sermon, did he hear back. His phone began to ring, and he recognized the number as Kate's. "Hello, Kate. How are you?" "He's awake and he's asking for you." "He is?" "Yeah, wants to meet the man who saved his life." "I'll be right over." He nodded to Father Jacob, who understood what was happening without asking, and made the brief trip to the hospital. As he approached the room, he could hear Peter's voice. He sounded happy, despite what he had gone through. "Tom," he said, knowing who I was without having ever seen me, "you look a lot better since I last saw you in a coffin." "Trust me, I feel a lot better too. I have no real way of thanking you for what you've done for me, but I'll find something." "You don't have to. I was simply doing what was expected of me." "That doesn't mean we can't be rewarded for doing a good job. Honestly, thank you." "Of course." "We wanted to talk to you about the wedding," Kate said, taking over. "We're still planning to have that in a week, and we're wondering if you would join us there." "Next Saturday?" "Yeah, I'd love to. Let me make sure I get my conflicts moved around." They sat and talked for a while longer, and Tom got to know the young couple a lot better. They had so many dreams and aspirations, and a deep love for each other. A love that was almost greedily taken away by his stepmother. A week came and passed, and Tom stood in the mirror of the church dressing room, checking his outfit to make sure he was presentable for the event. Once he'd confirmed with himself and gotten out of his own head, he made his way over to the venue, a beautiful little outside farm area not too far from town. The aisle divided the seats for the ceremony, keeping their sides separated. He figured it didn't matter much where he sat, so he went for the one with fewer people. He received a few intrigued looks as he sat, but paid them no attention. The day wasn't about him, and he didn't want to bring himself any of their attention. A person he didn't recognize officiated the wedding and walked out with Peter about 5 minutes before Kate walked down the aisle with her dad. It began with a prayer, and the two of them went through their ceremony. It wasn't abridged this time. They had all the time in the world to cherish the moment. "Do you, Peter, take Kate to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," he said, smiling at her. "And do you, Kate, take Peter to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "Yes, I do." "Then by the power vested in me by God and the state of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may now kiss the bride." They kissed, and the crowd clapped on both sides. The two of them spared no time running down the aisle, disappearing to change for the reception. Tom smiled, and when his row was dismissed, he went to go find his assigned seating at the reception. It was the table next to them, essentially alone, aside from one other man. He was worried his placement had been too last minute, but it was no worry. He was grateful they thought of him for their marriage anyway. "What are you in for?" he joked, taking his seat next to the man. "Reading of the will." "What?" "Yep." Kate and Peter appeared back in the reception area, and their DJ announced their presence. Once again, everyone stood and clapped, and as the dinner plans were announced, Kate motioned to the man sitting next to Tom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, standing, "I am here to read the will of Peter's father, Andrew. As some of you know, he left a significant amount of his property to Peter. And so, without further ado, Peter, if you're reading this, I didn't make it. I have no way of knowing when exactly it happened. But I hope you haven't or didn't grieve too much. No matter how much you love this life, it is short, and you too will pass one day. Nothing is forever. But hey, at least you've gotten married. Let me be the first to say congratulations. If I'm not, redo the entire ceremony. For legal purposes, I'm kidding. Congratulations. The reason I asked for my will to be read to you only in case of your marriage was because I didn't want you to make my mistakes. But I underestimated you, son. Kate is a wonderful partner and will be for life. Please protect her at all costs. As you've probably expected, I'm leaving all of my businesses and properties to you. I think you will figure out exactly what to do with all of it. Not that I'll care. It won't matter at all, and I'm proof of that. Here I am, 6 feet under, wearing only a suit. I had everything one day and dirt the next. Maybe I spent too much of my life in a suit, and maybe that's karmic justice. I wish I would have spent more time with you and your mother. I love you both. I know she would be proud of you too. Last, please be cautious of your stepmother. With all of this fortune, I know the two of you didn't get along very well, and I'm worried she may have the wrong intentions about the fortune. I love you, Peter. The man handed the will over to Peter to read. He was shaking at his table, looking it over, and tears were streaming down his face. The handwritten, "I love you" from his dad was more than enough to kick all the grief of losing him up. Kate was crying too, but there was a smile on her face. In fact, most of the reception hall had misty eyes. His dad must have been a good man. Then the festivities began. Food was had, and the night was enjoyed. The newlywed couple were more than happy, and danced long into the night. 2 Sundays later, right after the morning service, Tom received a phone call again from Kate, asking him to dinner at their house. He obliged, having grown closer to the couple. The door swung open for him before he could even reach up to knock, and Kate waved him in. "Glad you could make it. It's almost ready." "Thank you for the invite. Wouldn't want you to miss it." He followed her in. There were a few faces he only recognized from the wedding there, and he realized it was a friend hangout. He mingled with the group a little in the newly inherited house, which was larger than the one he had lived in a decade ago. They sat at a large table for dinner, which fit the entire group, and food was passed along. "Henry, Frank, Tim, this is Tom," Peter said, pointing his fork across the table. "This is the man that saved my life." "Heard great things about you," one of them said. Tom smiled. "Hopefully the legends aren't out of control." "I want to know how you even thought to look for a mask," Peter said. "Past experience is all." "What do you mean? What's your history? You never talk about yourself. Do you have a family?" The smile vanished from Tom's face, and something much calmer took hold. "Yeah, I used to. A son and wife, they were perfect. I used to be a detective. There was a cartel that was running drugs and other things across the border, and I was determined to crack the case. I didn't heed the warnings or the threats to my family, and I paid the price." "I'm sorry to hear that," Kate said, frowning. "That's awful," Peter echoed. It was. I hit a very low point in my life, but Father Jacob took me in not long after, and church shaped me into a different person. I now know I'm grateful that I had a chance to have a family, no matter how short-lived it was. "You know, I don't think we're so different." "How so?" "We've both lost our families. I grew up with my mom after Dad left, but I never hated him for it. We struggled to get by, but that's helped me value the little things in life. I don't even know what to do with all of this inheritance. But we made amends, and now I'm just happy to have had him in my life for when he was. Mom passed a few years before he did. I guess all things happen for a reason then." "I sure hope so. Otherwise, we've hit the life lesson lottery pretty well." Smiles were back, and dinner proceeded. As soon as it was done, however, Peter clapped. "All right, time for everyone to get out of here." "What?" one of his friends asked. "It was a nice dinner, but everyone has to leave now. Kate and I are going on a hiking trip tomorrow and need to get moving." Despite the abruptness, everyone left in good spirits. Tom was the last to head for the door, thanking them gratefully for dinner. "Actually, we're not done with you yet," Peter said. "How do you mean?" "I told you I wanted to find a way to thank you for saving my life, and I intend to make good on my word, so we've talked, and we want you to have the house." This house? Yeah? This massive house?" "Yep." "Why?" "Because you live at the church, Tom." "How do you know that?" "Nobody knows that." "We've done our research. You need this much more than we do." "I don't know if I can accept this." "Please, I insist. I'm not used to the lavish lifestyle, and this is way too pretentious for me. If you don't want it, throw it up for sale and buy something smaller. but we don't want it. He moved in the next day as they left for their hiking trip. Like Peter, he thought it was too much, especially for one person, but he didn't intend on it staying that way. The moment he'd situated the main bedroom with what little possessions he had, he put posters up in the church letting people know to spread the word. The house was to become a halfway home, much like he'd done for years prior. Only now, it could be on a much larger scale. Slowly but surely, people from all walks of life would come to his doorstep, and he would welcome them in with open arms. Sometimes they were homeless, sometimes jobless, and sometimes just struggling. But he didn't care. He would help them get themselves back on their feet, and then they would leave, and maybe they would be doing better. His success rate had risen over the years, but he was still far from perfect. And then 2 years went by of doing the same thing for hundreds of people, and after a week without a new face in the house, he realized things had started to slow down. He hadn't seen a new homeless person in a month, and the last one just left his care to get their own apartment. Even his nightly walks didn't yield a drunk person on the ground, desperate for care. His walks went further, looping across the entire town in one night, but the streets were vibrant with joyful life, not that of pain. Even the overdoses on the other side of town had dropped. The last of his recipients, a younger man who had fled his hometown to escape his abusive family, approached him one day, and with a bit of a frown, broke the news to him. "It's time for me to go back, Tom." "Already?" "It's been 4 months since the incident. I've restarted my life. It's time." Tom stood up from his desk and walked with the man to the front door. "If you see someone, you send them my way, all right? Don't forget what you got here, and what others can, too." "Of course. Thank you, Tom. I'll never be able to repay you. You've been around for enough of these to know I never want repayment." "I know. Goodbye. Goodbye." He watched the man walk down the driveway with his backpack of belongings, and as soon as the door closed behind him, he felt empty, lonely. For the first time in years, he was lonely. The house seemed to echo his footsteps, further ingraining the mood. He couldn't live alone in a house like this. There was nothing for him. 3 knocks rapped on the door. He turned around to open it again, smiling. "Forget something, Gus." The man hadn't come back. It was, in fact, a woman with a toddler. She had a suitcase behind her with a plastic bag tied around the top of it. "Hello, are you Tom Barnes? I heard there was a priest around here helping people." I am, yes. How can I help?" "Well, you see, we're from about 2 hours north of here. This is sort of my last resort, and I'm a little embarrassed." "Well, you're just in luck. My last pet project just walked out the door, ready to start the next chapter in his life. You have free pick of any room in the house, both of you." "This house is big," her son said, looking at the raised ceiling. "It is, isn't it, buddy?" his mom asked. "Where are the rooms?" "Right up this way. Let me guide you." For an entire month, Sarah and Noah, the single mother and her son, were under his care. The more time he spent with them, the more he was dreading the day when they would have to leave. They reminded him too much of his wife and son. They weren't romantically engaged, but they filled that gap in his heart. Playing with Noah became the highlight of his day. He wasn't sure if she felt what he did too, but it all came crashing down on a Sunday afternoon towards the end of the month. Tom returned from the church to find the 2 of them were gone with no warning. Their suitcases and belongings were gone, and so was almost any sign they had been in the house with him. He sat down on the front porch and put his hands in his hair. Realistically, there hadn't been anything between them, and he knew that. But they patched that heartache that he'd felt for years. He knew in another few years he would have the same outlook as he did with his wife and son, where he was just glad he had them in his life for a time. But for the moment, he needed to grieve. So he sat on the front porch for a few hours, taking it in. He almost didn't want to go back into the house. He didn't want to hear the echo again. A pickup truck looped around to the front of the house and stopped right at the driveway. Sarah jumped out of the front passenger seat, smiling, and unleashed Noah, who jumped out of the truck and ran towards Tom, colliding against him with a hug. They weren't gone. His smile returned. Sarah was smiling too. He wasn't sure who the driver was, but he felt a little nervous about someone having come to pick them up. Until he saw Peter walk around from the driver's seat. "Peter!" he shouted, laughing. "What are you doing here?" "I just came to stop by and see how things were going when I was greeted by these two. You didn't tell me you turned this place into a halfway house?" "It's the only way to not feel guilty about owning such a massive home." "I get it. They told me about all of it, and I got so excited. We went out for a bit of shopping. All new sets of clothes, and a run-through of all the necessities. No more scrounging for soap." "I got a Pete the Cat book," Noah said. "I see that," Tom said, smiling. "This is very thoughtful of you, Peter." "Oh, it's the least I could do. What with the business taking off? I spend most of the revenue helping people anyway. I'll bet you've noticed the streets are cleaned up a little." "I thought that was my fault." "Yeah, and I thought it was mine. Turns out we're both a little responsible for it." "Well, how does dinner sound? You can bring Kate. It'd be nice to catch up together." "I like the sound of that. I'll let her know." Tom smiled as Peter walked away, and Noah went back to talking about Pete the Cat as they stepped inside. The most significant discussion piece of the night was the bump in Kate's belly. It was all the two of them could talk about. They were so excited to be having a little girl. Noah didn't fully understand what was happening, but was more than happy with his chicken nuggets compared to everyone else's veggie stew. As everyone caught up with each other, Peter approached Tom in the kitchen. "Hey, I know this is very sudden, but Kate and I have talked about it." "Not this again," Tom smiled. "No, not like that. We were wondering if you wanted to be the grandpa. There's not really a good example on either side we can have for one, and, well, I think you'd fit the bill pretty well." Tom did his best not to break down in tears at that very moment. His heart melted at the thought of them wanting to include him. Not only did it mean being a grandfather, it meant Peter thought of him as a father figure. "I'm not sure I could say no," Tom answered. "Great. Good. She'll be glad to hear." Tom rejoined the group in the kitchen, and Tom stared at them all, more content than he had been in a long time. That evening, after Sarah and Noah had gone to bed, Tom stood out on the front porch, staring into the night sky. The stars were bright and plentiful. With all the emotions of the day, it was clear to him he was harboring warm feelings toward Sarah. He wasn't sure if or when he should confront her about it. That was until she stepped out onto the porch to join him. "Can't sleep? Thought I might stay out here for a little while, watching the world." "I get it. It's been one of those days. Makes you think about the future." Yeah, they stood quietly side by side for a moment, listening to the sounds of the world. "What kind of future do you want?" she asked him, breaking his attention. "What do you mean? What do you want for your future? What do you see in it?" He looked down at his feet, then at her. I think I want you in it. I don't want you to leave. I want you and Noah to stay here. I know this is grossly overstepping my boundaries, but I was hoping you felt the same way. I've wanted to ask for a while, but I couldn't bring myself to. I've seen the way you've been with Noah and your talk of your past. You make a good dad, and I think I'm in love with you. I just couldn't be the one to make the first step for whatever reason." "Oh, good. I'm glad we agree then," she smiled. "Come here, you." He did as told, and she gave him a soft kiss on the cheek. As the night enveloped their home, Tom felt a profound sense of closure. The past would always be a part of him, but it no longer haunted him. He had found love and redemption in the arms of his new family. Together they had built a future that was once unimaginable, a testament to the resilience of the human heart and the redemptive power of love. In this new chapter of his life, Tom had discovered that even in the aftermath of great loss, life could blossom in the most unexpected ways, offering a second chance at happiness.